Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Far Above Rubies. Today, as we continue our walk through this series on miracles, we're talking about the miracle in the fiery furnace. Your reading challenge for today is going to be Daniel chapter 3, and we're going to read verse 28 together. And it says this: Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own." Any god except their own. If you're not familiar with the story, I'll give you the small and short of it, but please go and read Daniel chapter 3. In this story, King Nebuchadnezzar had built a statue that he expected everyone in the land to bow down to and worship. Well, of course, the 3 Hebrew boys who served the one true living God refused to bow to this statue. And we say, of course they did. And yet, would we be brave enough to do this in the face of certain death? They refused to bow to the statue. They refused to pray to the statue. And people who didn't like them went and tattled on them to the king. And the king got angry. He was furious. How dare they defy a decree from the king? So he had the fiery furnace, the furnace of fire, he had them crank the heat up until it was hot, hot, hot. So hot that people were killed just from standing near the entrance. It tells us that men fell flat to the ground, dead from standing near the entrance of this furnace. He had these boys bound and thrown into the furnace. And then he goes back to see how things are going. Isn't that some depravity for you? He goes back to see how things are going, and he looks and he says, "Wait a second. Didn't we throw 3 young men into this fire? Because I see 4 and they're walking around. They're taking a Sunday stroll in the middle of my fiery furnace." He was amazed, and he had them pulled out of the fire, and it says that their clothes didn't even smell of smoke. Their clothes weren't even singed, or their hair wasn't even smelling of smoke when they came out of this fire. They were untouched and unharmed. And this witness of this miracle completely changed King Nebuchadnezzar. And he says, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any other god than their own." The loyalty and trust of these young men brought about this miracle. If you'll read the passage, Daniel 3, they have a conversation with the king and they say, "Listen, we're not going to bow down and we're not going to worship. Our God is able to save us from your fiery furnace. But even if he doesn't, he is still God and we serve him." That's trust. That's loyalty. It takes a lot of faith to say, God's going to save us. God's going to pull me through. God's going to deal with my circumstance. God's going to provide. But it takes a level of trust, something that moves, in my opinion, beyond faith. Not just faith, but trust to say, I know he can. I have faith that he can, but even if he doesn't, I serve him. Even if he doesn't, I will bow to nothing else in my life. I'll not bow to money. I'll not bow to position or power or influence. I will not put any of these things before God. That takes trust. That takes trust. Loyalty to God and trust in God brought about their miracle. They were unwavering even in the face of persecution and certain death. When they were thrown into that fiery furnace, I'm sure they were thinking, "Okay, God, any time now," as they were heave-hoed into the furnace. It must have been so incredibly scary. They must have thought they were going to meet their Maker. But oh, did they have any idea they might meet him in the middle of the fire? Their faith was not convenient. Their faith was not popular. But their faith was their identity, and they were not ashamed of it. They were not going to hide it. They were not going to put it under a bushel. They were not going to say, well, I'm a Christian over here in the corner as long as I can not offend anybody, as long as my faith doesn't bother anybody, as long as my faith is not in any way inconveniencing myself or anyone else, then I'm a Christian. No, they said, my faith is unpopular. My faith is inconvenient. My faith will get me killed in this moment, and yet I will stand unwavering, trusting in the God that I serve. The trial that they experienced opened the eyes of the most influential person they had come in contact with. And it had a tremendous impact on their culture. You see, the king goes on to say that no one is allowed to speak against the God that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego serve. It changed the perspective of royalty. It changed the perspective, the viewpoint, the way that others treated the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because these three young men were not worried about their faith being inconvenient or unpopular, because it was their identity. It was who they were. It was not a hat they could take off and lay aside. It wasn't a card they kept in their pocket for just the right times to pull out and say, oh yeah, I'm one of them. It was who they were. They were children of God. That's who they were. Go and read Daniel chapter 3 today, and I hope that you're inspired by these kids and their loyalty and their trust in the God that we both serve. If no one has told you lately, you are loved and you are cherished and you are valuable. You have beautiful and tremendous worth, my sweet friend, and that worth is far above rubies. Thank you for tuning in today, and I'll see you again soon. God bless you.